Good evening, everyone. Thank you, and I welcome all of you for this, webinar on diagnosing and managing COVID in the second wave. I thank the organizers, especially the CCI and our, Krishna and the team for giving all of us an opportunity, and also the organizing team of CIPLA for giving us an opportunity to do this webinar. I also welcome my fellow panelists, who are there with me. We have an excellent panel. Govind Desai, Nagarjuna from Hyderabad, Govind Desai from Jodhpur, Vikas Pilania from Jaipur, Mayank Saxena, who will join us, now, and Mehul Thakkar from Mumbai. So welcome all of you. I know all of you are busy, but I'm sure you're looking forward to hear from all of our experienced panelists. And I'm Dr. Satish. I'm going to, moderate this webinar. So all of you are aware of the statistics. Every day we are, peaking the scale. So every day we are creating a record of sorts. Yesterday was something, today again is coming up. So the COVID is raging in India, the second wave. In fact, the whole world is watching us. Just about 1 month back, 1.5 months, everyone was saying, oh, India, has managed to plateau the curve and has managed to control the, COVID, first wave. But, inside, all of us knew that there is something in store, something is going to happen. We all knew, many epidemiologists and seniors, predicted that there's going to be, going by the experience of Europe, America, and other, countries. But I honestly feel that, we were not really prepared for the second wave, and we underestimated the second wave. We also underestimated our enemy, So that is one of the reason, and naturally our enemy is SARS-CoV 19, and which SARS-CoV-2, and which mutated, and double mutation is well known now in India. And this is the way the viruses do, whether it is coronavirus, whether it is adenovirus, whether it is HIV virus, or whether it is H1N1 virus. Their ability to overcome the obstacles, which is our medication or our antibodies, whatever, that is the way they mutate. The mutation is natural in all these viruses, and to overcome all these obstacles that they face. So what we are, without wasting much time, what we are going to do is to talk about very practical aspects, not go by theory of how it spreads, what we should do, what mask we should wear, and all that. So that I will leave it to everyone, which we have heard many times. We are all aware of it. So I'm going to start by asking all my panelists very practical questions. After 1 year of COVID, I think we should all be knowing what to use, what not to use, what is harmful, what is not harmful, and the timing is important here. And briefly to say that, during the viral phase, there is viral multiplication. The virus just keeps multiplying, and then our immune system keeps fighting it. And since it is a novel coronavirus, it has no clue. So it takes some time to, to bring down the viral replication. And if our immunity is good, and if we have enough antibodies naturally or through the vaccine, we are able to contain the viral replication. And then in the second phase, which is the inflammatory phase or the pulmonary phase, that is when from the 7th day or the 8th day, when the immune system goes overboard in some individuals, maybe about 15%, 85% do very well, and that is when it starts giving problems. So that is when the inflammatory phase, and then of course the recovery phase. And as all of us know, in 1 year we have learned so much about it. If you just search on the PubMed, there are about some 50,000 articles which you will see. So we should know, what works and what not works, and timing is very important. And again, let me stress, I know there are, senior doctors here, the day one of symptom, not the day one of testing. Day one of symptom is the key here and a landmark here. So everyone must find out day one of symptom and carefully listen to the patient. And then, of course, what happens in the second week. So, because these drugs are made to act on particular phase of the virus and the stage of the disease. So that is why it is important to find out day 7, day 8, day 15, and then what tests to be done, what tests not to be done. So these are some things which I start off the webinar with this introductory remark. So let me see the second wave. We have seen different kind of symptoms. All of us know about it. Second wave, there are different symptoms than what we saw in the first wave. So let's start with that, and find out from the panelists, and to see what kind of second wave symptoms which are not so unique in the first wave that we have all seen. I know we have seen a different kind of symptoms and clinical features. Let's ask one by one, just one line. Everyone can contribute now. This is introduction. Go on.
Satish sir. So in the second wave, what I feel is the common symptoms of the first wave remain the common symptoms. Fever, cough, body pains, sore throat, these still remain the crux of symptoms in most of the people. But what I have observed is coryza.
Yes.
In the first wave, people had running nose or cold as a presenting symptom, but in the second wave, we're seeing a lot of people with cold and flu-like symptoms. So in fact, there were a lot of messages which went around saying that if you have a running nose or cold, it is flu season, it is the seasonal flu, not COVID. But somehow this is one thing which we have noticed, that the coryza as a presenting symptom or as one of the symptoms we are seeing very often in the second wave. This is my observation, not yet documented or published anywhere.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, go on.
Satish, in my observation, the difference between the first and second wave in Jaipur, in first wave there was clear-cut symptoms for the common symptoms that like cough, cold, fever, followed by the pneumonia or dyspnea after 4 to 5 days. But in this wave, there are multiple clinical variants of the disease, at least 3 or 4. Few patients are coming with simple history of fever, cold and cough, that is the cardinal symptoms. But another group is coming with complaint of abdominal pain, diarrhea, and bloating sensation. No fever, no cough, nothing. And after 4, 5, 6 days, patient develop dyspnea. And another group is coming with severe myalgia, body ache, body pain, but no fever, no cough, nothing. Day 4 or 5th, they develop pneumonia. And a third variant, which is coming with severe coryza-like symptoms, followed by pneumonia. So there are multiple, at least 3 to 4 variants are usually seen in this type of in second wave.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else wants to?
Yeah, can I chip in, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, I agree with Dr. Vikas. We are also in Mumbai seeing the same thing. The most common symptoms of upper respiratory and lower respiratory symptoms which we are seeing in the first wave have kind of now become like a viral prodrome. A body ache, a joint pain. We've had low back pain plus coming, and then suddenly 3-4 days later they're getting fever and developing ARDS or a pneumonia-like picture. And GI symptoms, as Dr. Vikas said, we also seeing very commonly. And specifically in Mumbai, when this thing opened up, the outside street food opened up, we initially presumed it could be just any other viral, but we turned out that the GI symptoms are coming out to be a COVID symptom. They come with either some loose stools, some abdominal vague discomfort, and then developing 3rd or 4th day fever and respiratory symptoms.
Yes.
So we are also seeing the 2 strains that Dr. Vikas is talking about.
Yes, absolutely right. And then some have also seen conjunctivitis. My become red, isn't it? Yeah. Govind, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. So, as the other panelists have spoken about, the same complaints have been observed by me also, sir. I would also add up to say that right now I'm COVID positive and my initial symptom was rhinitis.
Okay.
So,
you're looking.
So a lot of.
You're looking good. You're looking handsome.
Yeah, today is my day 8 of symptoms, sir.
Oh,
I'm fine.
okay.
So,
And
I'm fine, sir.
and vaccinated, isn't it? Sorry,
I was vaccinated, sir. I was vaccinated. Both the shots of Covishield was taken, and it was almost 3 weeks from then which I got my COVID-19 infection.
All the best.
So, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, rhinitis is one of the complaints which I have been seeing a lot, and a lot of even phones have been coming up by my colleagues who are around 25 to 40 years who are having with flu-like symptoms, and diarrhea and nausea are the other set of symptoms.
True.
Which have been coming up, sir.
Yes, absolutely. And some patients have just said, I'm not feeling good for last 1 week. They don't have fever. I don't feel good. That itself is, some symptom. And many a time when you quiz them, carefully, no, I have this cough. I used to get this cough, and they keep saying about it. If you ask them, do you feel weak? Because we have seen, asthmatics in our, all our life. They have cough, they have all this. And another symptom, which is headache. I had just 4 days back one patient, severe headache. I said, did you have this kind of headache before, like a migraine? No, I never had. So do a COVID test. She was surprised that I'm asking for a COVID test for a headache. I said, please do and let me know. And then she was positive. So we are seeing all this. If we collect all the data, we will also, know what are the, second wave symptoms, and, we keep learning. So feeling not well, I don't feel good inside, that itself is a symptom. So let's move on. Also, I think,
one thing, sir.
Yeah.
So I'll be very quick. So I have noticed 3 things the patient has been mentioning. First of all, the symptoms this time are aggressive.
Yes.
Like last time the fever used to resolve in a day. Now it is a persistent kind of fever that roams for 7 to 8 days.
Yes.
So people may usually get the typhoid test and all these kind of tests that are used for 7 days fever basically. Second thing, patient are not like patient when they are not feeling fever kind of thing, but when they put a temperature, the thermometer is saying the fever is like I have heard so many patients that I'm all fine, but when I check, it comes out to be 100 or 100.5 or 101.
That's right.
So your that question, like your that assertion, like the patient is not feeling well from inside us, that feeling of unwell. So we should always check the temperature at that point of time. He may be febrile. The third point I'm seeing is the cough with the choking sensation, and the cough is associated with desaturation.
Yes.
In this time, the cough, every time the patient cough, the saturation goes to, like we see an ILD kind of patient.
Yes.
So these are the patients that we can expect to run a very progressive course. So these are my 3 additional.
Oh, you're right. I have also a patient, who says whenever I cough, it drops to 87. So that's, very true. And as you said, these are, some symptoms which, if we carefully pay attention to it, we will definitely learn about it and, make a diagnosis, because we should not be missing some of these unusual symptoms. Just patient.
I'd just like to add one comment.
Yeah.
This is just to say the symptom presentation in elders will differ from that in the younger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beyond 65, what we see is they don't come with the typical symptoms of cough, fever.
Yes.
They present with what you had said, sir: apathy, anorexia, weakness.
Very true.
I always tell, if you have an elder person who's suddenly not eating or not feeling weak, so then that is also an alarm symptom which we should identify and probably test also. This is especially elders. And there was actually one study from UK, I think the first wave itself, where they have looked at the symptom profiles, and 5 symptom profiles, one of which was this apathy, anorexia thing, seen in elders, and that is also associated with a very bad cytokine storm later on.
Yeah, very true, very true. I think we have discussed about the clinical features, the way that the second wave is presenting to us, and then the virus is behaving in definitely a different way from the first wave. But also, I think just to add, we were seeing 7 days from day 1 of symptom to 7 days. But as as one of you said that sometimes we are seeing even 5 days patient desaturating. They are already in the inflammatory phase, which also was well known. but that we should pay attention and be careful, which means that they may be unwell few days before, but they may not really come up and say, no, I was okay, feeling little tired, but nothing, it's because of my my heavy work, stress at office, and then weather and so on and so forth. So let's move on. Okay, let's move on and see, is there anything about diagnostic that we should think about it? And that test, I know all of you have something to say about it, the identifying the specific type of spike protein or N protein or ORF, and our tests, the virus is escaping from this. A quick one anybody can say about this. And I just want to say that that I am seeing everyone with a CT value of, even though I don't pay much attention to it, except those who are after 15 days, if they are 33, 34, they are non-infective. But I'm seeing everyone with 24, 23, 26 like that, and no, not like the earlier ones. Go on. Anybody can. Quickly, yeah.
So as far as the diagnosis is concerned, I think it remains almost same as the first wave. RT-PCR remains the gold standard, but you should never have negative RT-PCR. That is the only thing which I think
Yes.
most of us know as a pulmonologist, but for the common person, I think negative RT-PCR should be taken with a pinch of salt.
Absolutely.
At the CT value, I think it's again a very debatable thing. Now
True.
that all the reports have CT value printed,
Yes.
the CT value for each gene will be different.
Yes.
So CT value will you consider? And then CT value also will depend on how well you have swabbed the person. And there is no objective proof to say that CT value correlates with disease severity.
Yes.
I seriously do not give much importance to CT value.
Absolutely. You said it right. I also go by that. And then, as you rightly said, still the gold standard is RT-PCR. And we all know it can pick up only 65%. And a good test which makes patient cry, tears, or has pain in the tympanic, is the one. Oh, this was a horrible guy. He poked me everywhere. That is the one which will give a good yield. You're right. You said it right. So the CT values in the WhatsApp University, everyone knows about it. They keep saying my CT value is 24, my CT value is 20.
So sometimes it is so confusing.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to add regarding CT value, the timing of test is very important, because we all know the viral load is maximum 2 days before the first day of symptoms to after the 2 days to the symptoms. So if the test is done in this time, the CT value may be less, more or less. But if we do the test in later time of the disease, the CT value may be high. So the timing of test is very important, at which time the test was performed.
So recently, ICMR also released a paper on that, about this CT value. They have clearly mentioned that it has discouraged, because there is no standardization of labs, there is no standardization of machines. Even the machines could pick up 30 DNA in the cycles, or some machines could pick up 100 DNA in the cycles. So, so if I see some a very reputed company running up to late positivity, while the other company would be saying, so it is a standardization also matters in that.
Yes, yes. I mean, quickly we'll move on. If, as Nagarjan mentioned, that a negative PCR test does not mean patient does not have corona. We should make an attempt if he has continuous, if he has very symptoms very typical of this, we should, do a, CT scan or other means to diagnose. So let's move on, with the treatment, just a minute. Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
I think before that, I think CT value is more to just define whether it is positive or negative. I think what Mayank also was telling,
nothing else.
35, I think, is the cutoff which has been placed. If it is below 35, it is taken as positive.
And more than 35, it is negative.
Negative, but it should not be considered as a surrogate for
marker of severity.
So I think this misconception is there.
No, but I'm actually in the second wave seeing a lot of antigen positivity, which I was not seeing earlier.
Actually, I was making this point. So many people are turning antigen positive, but
antigen positive.
And RT-PCR
antigen positive PCR negative means a poorly performed PCR.
That's exactly.
Yeah. So, that's about the diagnostic test, and then the others we will discuss as we go. and there are a lot of things to be discussed. Now, let's see what's happening to our old medication, because all of us keep seeing that some of these medications are being circulated still, which we know that so let's just one liner each one of you. Let's start with Nagarjun. HCQ.
No.
Okay, so Mehul, Doxy.
So doxycycline, not any proven role, but maybe
Good.
for secondary infection.
Yes, I want only one liner. This is one liner, quick one. Ivermectin. Because
Sir, we are giving a lot, but there is no defined role. Just like HCQS, ivermectin, in the last wave, the HCQS was hero. Now in this wave, that ivermectin is the hero, but no defined role.
Yes. So then
I would like to add up to this. Including ivermectin with the recent AIMS guidelines which have been published. Even then, in the mild cases, in the must-dos, there are two things. One is the must-do, wherein there are very symptomatic kind of management, and one is the may-do, in which they have added ivermectin 200 micrograms per day in the mild cases. And a lot of patients are on ivermectin, is what I suppose.
Yeah, even Maharashtra guidelines mention it.
Yeah,
Even
UP guideline also.
Yes, sir.
UP guideline also.
yes. So not strong evidence, for ivermectin. And I know the AIMS were, studying the dosage that is required, to inhibit the virus. I think it's huge. And similar to, I won't bring in the lopinavir, ritonavir, because it's all gone. The lopinavir, ritonavir, dosage that is required is something like, 10, 15, times what was given for these patients. So let's not, nobody is using that. So we still see, this azithromycin. Govind, you can only take azithromycin, extensively prescribed.
Yes, sir. Extensively prescribed and no effective role.
Absolutely. This is very clear. No effect at all in a viral disease, an antibiotic. The recovery trial showed, and then the chest also published this. No role. It may cause, even more, side effects of, side effects in, especially with cardiac patients. So none of these, have proven value. And, when we prescribe, I think, we should, set up an example as specialists that these have no role in antibiotic, and antiparasite and antibiotic and so on. But, we may change. We may have, next webinar where we say ivermectin works beautifully in this, this is the time and this is the dosage and so on. So that is what is in the COVID. So let's start with now evidence-based. So there is evidence-based, and I feel there are only 4 drugs in this pandemic COVID, and there are only 4 drugs, and there are some new kids on the block that we will discuss. So let's start with the one that I love and I like. Oh, I forgot to say about the favipiravir. Sorry. I will only do this so that we know quickly. Okay. So favipiravir, promised a lot in the beginning, but has absolutely, no evidence. No other country except, Saudi Arabia and some, Russia. Some of these countries are using it. And, if at all you have to give favipiravir, because I see on the 10th day, 11th day, 12th day, on all that. So I will tell you exactly where it has a role. If somebody has very high fever, 101, 102, and the second day, third day, and then very high flu symptoms, that is where it works in the 72 hours to bring down the
only.
7 days to probably 5 days. Otherwise, no value at all. I've seen even after discharge, Fabiflu being prescribed. So that is number one. The other thing is, for example, if a patient is in contact with the family members having COVID and is experiencing very high fever, the COVID test not done, CT not done, that is when probably it has a role. 72 hours, it has a role. So still debatable. No other countries are using recovery trial, didn't use. There was a trial which was supposed to be done in Canada. So we should be very careful and use only during this time, and not for every patient, who has no symptoms, just a throat itching, irritation. Never give Fabiflu and watchful for carefully for side effect. Let's move on. There's a lot of discussion, interesting discussion, in store. So let's start with, my favorite, where there is evidence. There is solid evidence, recovery trial, everything showed the steroids. So I have always said, recently when there is a shortage of remdesivir, with the media, the politicians, and everyone started saying, I have, said that, it's debatable that it has not saved even one single life in the pandemic. So it has only cut down the duration of illness or hospital stay from 15 days to 11 days. So that is how I put it, because don't worry if there is no remdesivir, don't go on prescribing and ask patient attenders to go around and get this, and it's available in black. We were discussing before this, people are selling in the, so anyway, there is, question about it. Let's start with steroids. Nagarjun, so I want you to ask about steroids. It is the proven evidence based. So let's start, Nagarjun, go on about the steroids. Go on.
So we'll have to discuss two things. They are the indications, timing, and dose.
Yes.
So as far as the steroids, definitely yes. It's the only drug which is but what are the indications? It is not everyone who should get it.
Oh, very true.
So the only two. One is evidence-based indication, that is people who are hypoxic. So by hypoxemia, it is not people who are who go below 90, but usually SpO2 below 94 also is considered as hypoxemia, resting or exertional. That is the time when I think steroids are definitely indicated. Two, I again see this is totally debatable. It is not evidence-based, but then what I also follow is people who have persistent symptoms in the second week, not responding to symptomatic care, persisting fever, persisting cough. Definitely, if you add steroids, most of them improve. But again, this if you ask me for RCT evidence, it won't be there. So this is as far as the indications for steroid. Big no in the first 5 to 7 days. First 5, absolute no.
Yes, sir.
No matter what, we won't give that day of onset of symptoms. As Dr. Satish is right, it is very, very important to ask for the onset of symptom. And from there you start calculating day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Till day 5 we will never give steroids. And again, as Dr. Mayank was telling, early inflammatory phase. So many people nowadays, 6th day, 7th day, they start showing high fevers, worsening hypoxemia. So anytime from day 6, if you feel that they are entering the inflammatory phase, the symptoms are not getting control, oxygen is falling down, from day 6 you are justified in adding steroids in the two things which I have said. So indications, timing, then dosage. Dosage, the recovery trial has used DEXA 6 mg irrespective of the disease severity. So then, but is DEXA 6 mg sufficient for everybody, even with sick people who are in the ICUs? Most of us will do agree that DEXA 6 mg may not be sufficient. What we follow is in OPD, they usually start anywhere between 0.5 milligram per kg prednisolone equivalent. So that will roughly be around DEXA 6 to 8 mg or prednisolone to 40 mg or whatever, whichever form is available. It is not absolute that you have to use dexamethasone only. But this is in the OPD or in the wards where they are not very sick. But once a person starts going into ARDS, definitely we all accept that DEXA 6 mg many times may not be sufficient to curb the inflammatory storm. So in wards we are sometimes compelled to use a higher dose. We go up to 2 to 3 milligram per kg of prednisolone. So that would roughly be around methylprednisolone of around 80 to 100 mg in very sick people. That is already on NIV, HFNC, all those things. But we do not go into very high pulses. In fact, there is one or two articles where they have used minimals 250 milligram per day for 3 days. And it's shown that the mortality is, there is some mortality benefit. So there are a lot of debatable things as far as the dosing is concerned. So you can start from 0.5 milligram per kg prednisolone and go up to 250 milligram per kg or very rarely 500 milligram per kg of methylprednisolone. I think this is my take on steroids.
Well said, Nagarjun. Well said. I think you covered everything. Absolutely right. I also do that. I also come back to that point which you mentioned, that there is no RCT on patients in the second week. having, high fever, 101, but their oxygen, persistent symptoms, there is definitely a role. And if you see the CRP level, it begins to go up in these patients. Then the first week, where there is only viral multiplication, there is no inflammation. That is when, you are 100% right. There are no RCT, but you said also about the 250 pulse therapy, excellent. And start with 0.5 milligram. That's also correct. I think you covered well. And there are many physicians and others who are using 1 gram. So we should never use those doses which are harmful, side effects. We all know about, as chest physicians, the side effects of oral steroids and over long period of time, including ventilated patients. They develop severe side effects. We should not, use those doses. Excellent. And let's ask Govin, because I've seen him easy on budesonide inhaler, 1600 micro. Govin, come in and say something about the budesonide.
So this budesonide, yes, sir. So this budesonide, according to the STOIC trial, has come recently, not more than I think 2 weeks from today.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I also read this article in the Lancet, and one of my sir also had asked me to start budesonide to my parents who were positive. As well as, sir, I think it's too early to say anything, and there's only one trial which has come up with Turbohaler using 800 micrograms BD, a total dose of 1600. But I think we can use it in a case of a mild COVID, 1600 micrograms, unless contraindicated or any particular side effects patient is more prone for. Then, if not, then I think we can go for 1600 micrograms of budesonide in the case of a mild. Specifically, again, I would go to the AIIMS guideline, wherein they have mentioned that if the person is having persistent symptoms for more than 5 days, they have advised for budesonide to be used. So whether budesonide had to be started from day 1 or should it be started from day 5 onwards in the case of a persistent symptoms is, I think, yet to be discussed.
Satish sir, one minor interruption.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello. Krishna here. Hello everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Krishna. Well,
hello, sir. Sir, it's going great. I appreciate it, and you are a true leader. No, let us. I also wanted to come here on the line regarding the COVID RT-PCR being the gold standard. Sometimes the wrong technique of collecting it, or even the sampling, when it comes, the COVID RT-PCR comes negative, but we are quite evident regarding the illness.
Yeah.
That I request you to kindly cover on this, and another few other points to add is the debacle regarding the remdesivir.
Yes, I will. We will.
And hydroxychloroquine, what it happened to it. Remdesivir is facing the same thing today.
Yeah.
Then how come it is out of stocks? And more importantly, sir, few also argue that when the COVID RT-PCR is negative and the patient is having a lot of symptoms related to COVID, then CT is gold standard.
Yes.
So kindly, sir, I request everybody here to focus on the gray areas and kindly keep rotating the questions to everyone.
True.
Satish, sir, you are a god. You are doing really true. Thank you so much. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted that we should not miss such things. Which Krishna, people are waiting to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Krishna. I think they are very important question you brought out. I think we answered, in a bit. So COVID. The PCR test, as you rightly said, is not the gold standard, test, like how we say about a coronary angiogram is the gold standard test. Similarly here, no. And then if they continue to have symptoms, we must impress upon them. There is a syndromic approach that all states are following, and do a CT scan if possible. And recently one of my patients, well-educated patient said, I think I have COVID, but we are only 2 of us. We will remain in the house completely for 15 days. I'm not going to do this test. If there's any problem, I will do. That's also fine, as long as they have confidence and in themselves and not doing a test. As long as they are not going to spread infection. They said we are also vaccinated. So we must spend time with patients about the data, because many of them also, I remember, one of my patients recently, was tested negative. So he went to his place in Davangere for the festival, the Ugadi festival. And then when he came back, I said, immediately you must, do, something about the test. And he was, say CT scan positive. So like that, as you said, we must approach the syndromic approach, and then impress upon our also bureaucrats and others also we have said that give a BU number which is required for these patients also, even though they are negative, and take care of them. Thanks.
Bye-bye everyone. Great going. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. Let me continue because we have lots of interesting things to say about it. Regarding the budesonide, Govind, very early. You don't have to wait for the, 5th day. You can start. Professor Russell from Oxford University the other day said that there is definitely evidence. It is showing in mild cases. You start upfront from the day one. And we all know as chest physicians, we have seen, many patients with, viral diseases. I remember 25 years back in London, Seb Johnson, who did a lot of work on, adenoviruses, rhinoviruses in children being benefited by, inhaled, steroids. And there were many papers. And with that background, I think Professor Russell did that study. And then we should really start that if it is going to help mild patients and continue to do that from the day one, even if they don't have symptoms. You don't wait for the symptoms because as you know, budesonide will take its own time to act. So by the time, it starts acting, it may be about 7 days or so. That is when the mild inflammatory, changes will occur. So that is about the
Satish, one thing I just wanted to ask. This STOIC trial, though I know that it is positive trial, but it is only 140 people.
Yes, sir. 160.
Can I add to that, Dr. Nagarjun? I understand the trial was very strong, but I can tell you about my experience. Since we're managing the COVID hospital with around 50 beds, for every patient who gets at least IPD, for symptomatic relief, if you give a budesonide inhaler, it works wonders. So cough suppressants, if they don't work and budesonide inhaler works, somewhere we are feeling even for OPD patients have started using that after that experience. So maybe we don't have that much data, but at least practically it works. As I was saying, even in other viral infections it works.
In fact,
that is basically because it suppresses the hyperreactivity of the airways. So that is true for all viruses, even post.
True. In fact, Professor Russell in that webinar said, that there are other 4 trials which are going on. Using also different, kind of inhaled steroids. Way back, I think about 8 months back, I think Sandeep Salvi did something about budesonide and cyclosinide. And in laboratory, evidence of cyclosinide is, much better, than because it is lung activated, much better than budesonide. I think, since it's not freely available, maybe, in UK, that is why they have used budesonide and maybe other molecules also will come up. Similarly, Dexona, why in UK they tried Dexona and we are all using methylprednisolone and prednisolone is because it's easily available in NHS, that's why. So let's move on there.
But so my point is if there is no mortality benefit, there is no evidence of suppressing the progression of disease, just for symptomatic relief, if you want to give, the steam works wonders.
Yeah. So no.
Steam doesn't work.
Don't compare.
Steam doesn't work in such cases.
No, don't compare with the steam. So enough shortage of water in India. Everyone is last 1 year, doing steam from 3-4 times a day. There's shortage of water.
But so my focus for the patient would be the patient who are in moderate to severe disease, and if any mortality benefit or a progression can be halted.
There is definitely an evidence which is showing when you start upfront from the beginning, definitely it benefits and prevents the inflammatory phase of the disease. Let's move on. I think we have discussed about the pulse therapy. Nagarjun beautifully explained us about what it is. So one has to be careful not to use during the viral phase of the disease, and it will prolong. I have had many patients, it will prolong the viremic phase and then cause more inflammation in the later. So let's come to what Krishna was saying about the most important drug which is discussed in India by the social media, print media, electronic media, everyone, that is remdesivir. So let's start with Vikas. He's on the screen. Vikas, so you tell us about your view quickly on remdesivir. I will give others also just a chance, one, because we are running short, quickly we have to, cover many of these quickly. Yeah. Are you there? Are you there?
No, I think
So,
Dr. Vikas has to unmute.
Yeah.
Dr. Vikas, you're on mute.
Because
Network issues.
yeah, network issues. Let's ask then Mayank. Mayank, you want to come in and take this quickly?
Sir, remdesivir, as per, there's so much of hype. The hype is actually not justified because what I am seeing, there are side effects also. The people are rushing it with the remdesivir to every patient, irrespective of day of disease. First of all, yes, first week hypoxemia. If you are seeing first week symptoms, if you are seeing severe disease, then you may be partly justified in giving remdesivir. But to see, you have to see the kidney function status, liver function status, and everything. So it is not a therapy for all. It is for a selected patient. Second thing, it may work with the adjunct therapy, but I am still to see a patient on remdesivir alone improving well without steroids.
Very true.
So the patient ultimately gets on the steroids, gets on the further course of treatment for the inflammatory phase, then only he will be getting up. So I am still to see a patient who had just received remdesivir in a moderate or severe phase and with a hypoxemic phase, who had just got relieved without the steroid. So if you're using two molecules, one molecule has a proven role, then the other molecule is becoming in a doubt, like what is the role. So we have to be very judicious in using remdesivir, though attendants demand because there is hype about it. So we have to again rationalize our approach and explain to the patient about the things. So I am not in a umbrella therapy for the remdesivir, but for selected patient, yes, as a checklist we can give.
Yeah. So, let me summarize what you said is right. The recovery trial, showed, that, it is useful only in this 5 days, great. When there is, as you said, hypoxemia, our patient requiring about 2 liters per minute, 7 days, okay. 9 days, including, our own, Bangalore, Dr. Ravid Mehta and team, from Apollo, they also, from the day one symptom, time to remdesivir, they calculated on 9 days. So after 10 days, 11 days, 12 days, it has absolutely no role at all. And if I don't have remdesivir, am I going to be perturbed? Am I going to be, worried that, this patient is going to die because of lack of remdesivir? Scientific evidence, as I mentioned briefly in my introductory remark, that 28-day mortality has not shown benefit of remdesivir. It cuts down the duration of hospital stay from 16 days to 11 days. That's all it is. Even the ACCT trial also has shown all this. So you are right. So there is definitely a niche patient where remdesivir has to be used. And you also mentioned that watchful for side effects of remdesivir and drug interactions, and so on. So Vikas is back. Vikas, quickly, if your network is okay, you can add something quickly, very quickly, about remdesivir. Because we have a few more molecules to discuss.
As you discussed, the role of remdesivir only in the early phase with selected patients with high viral load and having oxygen requirement. But after the 10 days, there is no role.
Absolutely.
Big no after the 10 days, but somehow people are very misinterpreting the role of remdesivir, and the public nowadays treating just like it's Sanjeevani Booty.
Yes.
There is, अगर remdesivir नहीं मिला तो उनको लगता है कि पता नहीं क्या होने वाला है, उसमें मिलेगा ही नहीं कुछ.
Absolutely, and it is sold in black market.
So remdesivir is beneficial, but in selected patient, and the timing of the remdesivir is very important.
Well said. Well said. Let's move on, because we have few more molecules to discuss. These are all evidence-based molecules. Let's talk about coagulation. Anticoagulation. We all know about how it works. It is COVID being a inflammatory thrombotic disease. This is again evidence-based anticoagulation. So who wants to come? Okay, let's ask Mehul. About anticoagulation, indication, contraindication, where we should be using, should we be using without a D-dimer being raised? What is it? quickly, one, short line.
So first thing first, if we think the patient is hypoxic,
yes,
this is a prothrombotic inflammatory state.
Yes,
we need to give anticoagulation.
Yes.
Antiplatelets have no role.
Absolutely.
That's the first thing I want to point out, because most of the patients are on neosporin or on oral anticoagulation like rivaroxaban on OPD basis. If there is hypoxemia, if there is severe inflammation, patient is in the ICU, then there is definite role of anticoagulation. I would give it in a therapeutic dose. If there is any renal dysfunction, I would change it to fondaparinux. I would prefer to give low molecular weight heparin. That is the first preferred choice for me. And if there's a renal dysfunction, I can go up to fondaparinux. If there is any other thing, we've got a lot of hematological complications, patients coming with thrombocytopenias or DIC-like picture, then the doses might vary depending on what is the requirement. But anticoagulation definitely has a role. I would give it to the duration of disease, that is, when the patient is in a hospital stay or in an immobile state at home when it is discharged, but not beyond that. I've seen patients taking it for 3 months, 6 months. There is no role for giving it for 6 months duration, but till the patient is immobile and hypoxic, there is a definite role.
Very true. And we all know that, patients who have COPD and so on and so forth, as you said, depends on that, and if there is an documented objective evidence where pulmonary emboli is sitting there,
embolism.
And of course there is a role to use it for, like a provoked emboli, to give it for 3 months to 6 months. Absolutely right. And as you also mentioned, if somebody is at home, slightly hypoxic, the D-dimer may be, normal, say for example, 90, 91, and definitely there is a role to give it for 2 weeks to cover that, about the anticoagulation. And there are, of course, side effects which we have to be, careful about it. So if nobody has anything about it, anticoagulation, let's close. And then, the fourth.
One last comment, because anticoagulation is indicated, but then therapeutic anticoagulation is not indicated for everybody who's admitted.
True.
What I would say is, people who are in the ICU, the set are the ones who would probably benefit from a therapeutic anticoagulation. Everyone else who are just in would only require prophylactic anticoagulation, just like any other medical disease.
Medical disease.
With COPD, we still give prophylactic anticoagulation, same thing. OPD cases, a strict no, unless until they are probably hypoxic but still in the OPD. That is the only group probably we would want to give. So in general, only therapeutic anticoagulation only for the sicker people in the ICU.
True. Can I ask one thing to add before we close down the remdesivir thing? Many people are still giving it for 10 days or so. I think the duration is 5 days. That needs to be stressed on the fact.
Yes, absolutely. There is some role which is mentioned for very severe cases where you have, where there is an indication for remdesivir. You can extend to 7 to 8 days. There is some role, but many trials have shown 5 days is good enough. You're right. And when there is a shortage, I think we should stick on to the 5 days course. So
I want to add one thing about the anticoagulation part. I am seeing this in this phase basically. It is also very depressing. The patient gets all well, all right. Despite on being anticoagulation, he suddenly crashes. This have happened to around 2-3 patients to me. And this is actually shocking, because the patient we were thinking of discharging in 1 to 2 days, and suddenly he desaturates. Maybe the pulmonary embolism part is there. So I may still choose to see the anticoagulation. Sometimes what happened due to the shortage of anticoagulants in market, systematic just not available or something like that. So always check and ensure that anticoagulation has been provided in those patients, because there is a high risk of pulmonary embolism.
Okay. So since we are on this, let me see.
You should also stress one thing, sir. Bleed complications are also common. May not be as much as thrombotic, but bleeds also have been documented, and that also should be considered. So we see a lot of people with abdominal bleeds and all sorts of bleeds in this COVID business.
Yeah. So Nagarjun, since you are there, let me ask you, out of the box, for example, severe, you suspect that the D-dimer is going up, to 6,000, and then, there is some echo evidence of a right pulmonary artery, right side of the heart, slight dysfunction. Do you think, many have tried also thrombolysis in these patients, microemboli and rising D-dimer? Have you tried patient? Today also I had one patient.
Thrombolysis in COVID has two scenarios. One, proven PTE.
That's right.
you take the resistance just like it's a PT of any cause. So if it is indicated, you think the hypoxia is worsened because of PT or hemodynamic instability, you thrombolyze. We have done thrombolysis for that particular subset. 2 thrombolysis for elevated D dimers and worsening hypoxemia where there is no proven PT. So where you are suspecting microthrombi as the cause for the disease. So thrombolysis has been attempted with some of our colleagues, but I have not used it personally, and who have used it also have said that it's of possible or not much of a role. So I think I use thrombolysis only for improving hypoxemia.
Yes,
No,
I mean,
one thing I want to add.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add regarding anticoagulants. Usually, people take the D-dimer as a cutoff value, and when the D-dimer is increasing, they use anticoagulant as in therapeutic doses. But one thing I experienced, that D-dimer not having a linear correlation with disease severity. It's much of marker of infectivity. Sorry, much of that hyper immune response rather than hypercoagulability. So in few cases the D-dimer is very high, but patient is doing well. So I think we should not take the D-dimer as a sole marker for hypercoagulability, and we should go according to the patient's clinical status.
Yeah, I mean, first week it's also a marker of inflammation like CRP and all that. So you should not worry too much about, instead of being 0.5, 0.6 and 0.7, people start worrying about it. So let's close this about anticoagulation. So there are cases, there are individual experiences about thrombolysis. Let's move on to the fourth one, which is evidence-based, is tocilizumab and itolizumab. So let's quickly ask Govind, you have been quiet. If you are okay, can you take this up?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So again, tocilizumab with a maximum dose of 800, and most of the people are being covered up with 400 milligrams, 8 milligrams per kg dosage. So the indication mainly here would be 2 things. Those patients whom we are having an sudden worsening trend of or sudden increasing trend in IL-6 and CRP. These would be the first set of patients, and the second set of patients, most of the time tocilizumab would be advised in the initial first 24 hours of hospitalization or ICU requirement, wherein the patient might be requiring all of a sudden use of NIV or high flow nasal oxygen. So in such set of patients, a single dose of tocilizumab can be tried, sir. But personally, we haven't seen most of the patients being given tocilizumab here in our institute. Only a subset of patients who are worsening in the first 24 hours are being given, sir.
Okay.
So not much given.
Yeah. So tocilizumab now has come back. If you go back to the Roche trial and then the Covecta trial, and then which was all negative trials, even in fact, I appreciated Roche coming out and saying it hasn't shown any mortality benefit. Now the recovery trial, has come back saying there is a niche of patients where, it is useful. Those on steroids not doing well, a CRP more than 75 is an indicator. Yes. So they have not mentioned about IL-6. I see left and right IL-6 being, done, and it is subjected for such variation, lab errors, and outpatients, people walking around with IL-6 of, saying, and they are perfectly fine, they are doing well in the IL-6 of 80. So one has to relate all this, markers to the patient's, symptom. So that is what is important. So IL-6 is not a criteria to give anti-IL, that is tocilizumab. So one can use this on steroids, not doing well patient. This is where patient before going on to non-invasive ventilator and then to ventilator, there is a niche there. Use it there, tocili, and of course there is some shortage again. And then I heard today that Karnataka has got some 300 vials and quota, like that. So anyway, that's about. So when there is a shortage, you can also use itolizumab. There is some, kind of a trial which is going on in India, even though in the beginning there was some shortcomings of this trial. So because of it acts one step behind this itolizumab in the cascade of inflammation. So people have tried this 1.6 milligram per kg, And there are some side effects. Some I have also tried. I've spoken to those who have used like 50 patients, where they have used, 0.9 milligram, on the first day, 0.6 milligram, I think, on the first day, and then followed by second. So that is about tocilizumab. And also they have used in patients who are ventilated. So critically ill patients also, have been given tocilizumab. And I think Tosili, has, role, there also, but, a lot of trials are going on. And the recaps, trial has shown that, again, the revisiting of, tocilizumab. So quickly, if anybody wants to say about Tosili, we'll move on to the next. If there is nothing,
sorry. So, sir, we have had very bad experience with tocilizumab. We've started using it since last
year. We have to be
October
careful. Now. Yes, contraindications, ruling out infection, all this. Go on.
So we've had, yes, sir, we've had very bad experience. So we've stopped using tocilizumab since October last year at 2 hospitals that I practice. And frankly speaking, so we've never felt the need since then. But we have seen, new data coming up. Probably we'll have to have a relook at our patients then. But still, currently we feel treating medically like we treat any other disease, any other viral infection makes more sense than introducing new drugs to this cocktail medicine that we give. So I have up till now not had a good experience with tocilizumab.
I think I'll add on to Dr. Mehul. See, in the first wave, we have given Tosili for a lot of people.
Yes.
Do respond. See, it's just like giving a pulse steroid. You give 250 mg steroid or give a lesser steroid and add Tosili. But if somebody develops infection after Tosili, then it's going to be a very dreaded infection.
Yes.
People we have lost because they developed fungal infections and they developed fulminant sepsis Tosili. To the extent that we are scared to give Tosili in intubated patients because the risk of developing VAP remains sky high in an overcrowded COVID ICU person on steroids developing sepsis. But whatever said then, the evidence says that it does have an add-on effect to steroids in select people. Tosili is still recommended. And the other thing is it is not there now. Hyderabad there is no supply.
Yeah. Okay. So
is procalcitonin one of the important tests, to be done before giving tocilizumab? What is?
See, many of our cases actually come referred from several peripheral hospitals. So where already been pumped with steroids, and in those people we usually do a baseline Procal, and
yes.
Procal levels come high, then already they have some associated superadded infection, and then in them we don't go with higher immunosuppressants.
I would like to add.
What happens is when a person continues to worsen,
using PCT as like every 4 or 5 days to see, because the patients are on steroids, what is the level if we need to upgrade that, because many times we will not be knowing when to upgrade the antibiotics.
Exactly, Dr. Mayank, I was just coming to that. Yes, so when a person on COVID continues to worsen, then there are two things. One, the COVID itself, the COVID inflammatory storm itself is relentless, or two, he has developed associated infections and that is leading to worsening. So many times we end up using Procal when the person is not improving, because it gives us some idea as to whether we have a secondary infection along with COVID or not. I think this is our practical experience, and we do repeat it once in 4 to 5 days in people who are not responding. If people are responding, we don't repeat.
I have one question. How many people do add antifungals to the regimen on like high steroids or per steroid or some?
No. We do galactomannan levels if we find patients are getting worse. So galactomannan beta-glucan does guide us. That is how our infectious colleagues are helping us, they say. But adding as a prophylactic, no.
No, prophylactic galactomannan only picks up, I think, aspergillus. Mucor doesn't.
Yes.
Doesn't pick up.
As I was talking about Tosili, after using Tosili, we have had
Mucor has come.
So what we have done was, in the first wave when Tosili was available with us, we used to give Tosili and prophylactic tablet posaconazole, just as was used in the BMT algorithms.
Okay.
That is also not evidence-based, but that was when we were giving Tosili. But now we stopped Tosili because it is not available, and we were having too many infections.
Okay. So let's close this, because we are overshooting the time because the question and answer. Quickly, one line on. There are some new kids on the block. I would like to call them baricitinib.
The two brothers, baricitinib and tofacitinib. Correct?
Yes.
Both of them have one trial to back their use. Both of them were used as a steroid sparing drugs. So both the trials, it was basically remdesivir plus bari versus remdesivir. Okay? So but in when you come to real life practice, you cannot deny a person a steroid. So steroid is the life-saving medicine.
Yes.
So how we are using baricitinib as a steroid sparing agent. So we're not going to the pulse doses, so we're just sticking to a lesser dose of steroid and we're adding baricitinib or tofacitinib. And then this practice has been since the last 1.5 months. Baricitinib we have used since 1.5 months in around hundreds of people. And then two things which we observed, unlike tocili, we're not seeing bad infections. And remdesivir plus low to moderate plus baricitinib seems to help.
Okay.
Randomized anybody, we don't know. But any drug for COVID will definitely go out of stock. So baricitinib is not there in Hyderabad now. We are forced to use tofacitinib. And tofacitinib is cheaper version. Bari is I think JAK2, tofa is JAK1 and JAK3 blocker.
Yes.
So basically JAK inhibitors. And tofacitinib has one more trial to back that it actually helps and decreases mortality. So 10 mg in the last 10 days we have started using as a replacement to baricitinib. So basically on the steroid dose by adding this other inflammatory blockers. See, this is just practical.
Since you're using it, I've used only in 5 patients up till now. But suppose if remdesivir is not available, would you still give baricitinib to this patient?
Now, see, the concept where it doesn't replace remdesivir. Remdesivir is an antiviral, this is an anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, so the trials have been with
there, we would still use it.
So, in the trial, the biggest trial where they have taken more than 1,000 patients, they've used baricitinib and remdesivir. And then, as Nagarjun said, as a steroid sparing agent, probably somebody with diabetic ketosis or where it is absolutely contraindicated, say an active bleeding peptic ulcer, that kind of a thing. And if I remember the trial, they also used for, the steroids were not used for patients with, were used, baricitinib with steroid was used with remdesivir because they were on steroids for a non-COVID reason, like exacerbation of a COPD, an exacerbation of an asthma. So, it's nice to hear, from Nagarjun that they have been using these JAK2 inhibitors as, he has used all baricitinib and, is not available, now. So we have to use.
Exhausted the stocks also.
The desperate situation, call for a desperate measure. That is what we are using. Even though if it is a small trial, also we are using that. I think better to, document it so we may have a bigger, numbers in India because we are going through the bad surge of COVID.
So I have one question. Would you like to reserve anti-inflammatory agent for a later usage, or you will add at once? Because I would still be believing on the current regimen, like if we give remdesivir and the steroids mainly, and then see if not improving, like you said, sir, in a niche where this NIV to ventilator as a desperate measure, if we use this. These anti-inflammatory, because if we once use baricitinib or these agents, we will not be using other agent, right? We will not be using tocili or Vivacin.
No.
So yes, so it is like we have got a one option, whether you want to utilize it at this time or that time.
Yeah, much cheaper, much cheaper, and then it's oral. Tofacitinib is oral. It's been circulated everywhere, and so maybe time will answer how useful it is, and definitely it has a role. So let's move on. I don't think I have any more except Nagarjun. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm very well here, sir.
So if Nagarjun is there, we cannot escape from asking him about interventional pulmonology and the role of bronchoscopy in very sick patients, number one. Number two, if there is bronchopleural fistula, pneumothoraces, all that, they have to be managed like any other patients. So you have anything to say? Just a quick one line.
No role of intervention pulmonology in COVID. That is
Except for when there is a collapse of the lung on the
no,
Yeah.
that is a common thing. Even then, I would still do nebulized whatever
No,
mucus.
it didn't work. It didn't work for a few patients. I had to do a bronchoscopy.
Okay.
It's an exceptional scenario where you want to do a bronchoscopy.
Yeah. So I will.
Where I've done where the trachea was filled with thrusts and then he was choking stridor, so we had to do an emergency clearing of gas, but otherwise no.
Okay. So I will stop here. I was thinking about vaccine. I think we have had enough on vaccine. Only to say that there are many who are discussing also in our group about if a patient has taken one dose of vaccine and then he develops an infection, that is what we are seeing. And then everyone is asking, when is the next dose, that he needs to take? So my take is, it's like the, first one itself. You take it after 2 months or 3 months because you have enough antibody and there is a shortage, you give chance to others. MOH states, that it is to be administered after one month. So a quick, anybody can answer because that's the commonest question that people ask, and then we'll move on with question and answer.
So once patient,
my take is I have seen reinfection in even 1.5 months, like patient who has got, so there may be 1 or 2 strain that are these may be like this, they may be no cross immunity. So I always encourage since vaccinations has been open to all, I always while discharging I motivate the patient to get the vaccination after 2 to 3 weeks time. If the patient is in a stormy phase, has got a stormy phase, I will advise in a 1 month or 1.5 or 2 months time. So, but asymptomatic or a mild course, I would advise, because I'm not sure whether antibodies would be sufficient or not, because I have 2-3 patients who have developed reinfections from this March, then again in this late April. So I would still advocate the early vaccination would be helpful. See, this year you will not be hearing so much of health workers succumbing to COVID. That may be the reason that they are being vaccinated, right?
Yeah. So as you know, the infection is common, but the disease, the serious illness.
So severity, succumbing means that only, that patients are not, the doctors and healthcare workers are not succumbing to the illness, or not getting.
It may be the vaccine, or maybe we have got mild disease and we are getting better also. Who knows?
Yeah.
Vaccination. I would like to say.
Many cases infected after second dose of vaccine, but no one was very serious.
Absolutely. So the message from the panelists and all of us is, please vaccinate everyone. Please ask questions to everyone, and then motivate them. Proactively tell them, why are you not doing? Many are still having doubts and they are hesitators of vaccine. Let's move on to now. I think we'll stop here. I think we've had an excellent.
So I had just one input, one question, one input to the panelist about the ventilation strategies. This is a very, very debatable thing in the COVID ICUs. When you will intubate the patient? This question. When
it's completely a different cup of tea. Let's not discuss now because it's completely different. And then, because we are short of time, let's move on because everyone is tired. There are questions. Yeah. Wow. Oh. Yes, I mean, that shows my panelists are excellent. They have done a great job, answering all the questions that are, have to be answered now in the second wave. Congratulations and everyone who was involved in this webinar. And thank you everyone for participating. So let's see.
One thing is left, sir. Bevacizumab.
Sorry?
Bevacizumab.
There's so many things left.
It is there. I thought,
plasma. So let us.
Plasma and also plasma select.
So all Zumabs should be left. All Zumab should be left alone.
Yes,
the basics medicine first.
One single dose. Very few patients. Bevacizumab. I have got 2 patients, not used personally, who asked me. I said, desperate measures, you don't have Tosili, you try, let us see, in the last 48 hours, this is about Bevacizumab. And of course, plasma, I will just summarize saying that it is used only in the first 5 days to 7 days, maximum 5 days, it is going to work. After 10 days, No way it is going to work when the patient himself start making an antibody after 10 days. So no plasma for, and then no great mortality benefit as ICMR study showed, recovery trial showed, Mayo Clinic study showed that no great benefit. So let's take up this question.
So can I ask one question about plasma?
Yes.
Like we are doing plasma is given from a patient who is recovered. The people who are vaccinated, there was one question which was asked by someone. People who are vaccinated and have those antibodies to the spike protein. Can they be plasma donors? Do you think theoretically that is going to be beneficial more than the plasma that we are giving right now?
Yeah, who wants to take it? I don't want to take
we can always measure the spike and neutralizing antibodies in the patient or subgroups, in the recipient as well as in the donor, so that we can be sure this can be a study. I don't know whether what is the right answer to that.
I don't think anybody has given plasma.
No, sir, I'm just thinking. The thought process can be worked on.
Yes, we should think about it. Let's move on. We have just about 15 minutes to close and question and answer. Let's see what type of questions I have. Somebody is asking about. I mean, since we have answered most, I'm not going to ask about. There is some question about pegylated alpha 2, which is there. So anybody wants to quickly say about it? It's a very small study. Don't know about it, and needs a lot of data. Looks promising. People are saying that it is a substitute for remdesivir because there is a shortage of this. So one has to be careful about this. Okay. So anybody wants to say quickly? Hello.
No, I think I have not used. So no experience.
Yeah. Okay. So, our, good friend Krishna is saying that, the login is a hit, it's a record. So, 1,500 odd, people watching during a very peak pandemic is really, fantastic for all of us, the panelists, and then of course the team which is involved in conducting this webinar. That's what I want to take this. So quickly, let's see what we have. So there is this question, as you said, can vaccinated person can donate plasma? So we don't know about it. Pegylated alpha, we answered. Very less trials on this. We are not sure about it. I think something on favipiravir, I think I answered very well that only in 72 hours. So somebody is asking about when is the second wave, going to end? Somebody asked in, Rajadhar, in the meeting, sir, when is the, third wave? So he beautifully and humorously said, exactly after 2 weeks of second wave is over, the third wave will begin. Okay. So can a vaccinated patient donate plasma? I think we answered about it. Mega doses of ascorbic acid, there are here and say, about it. I don't think there is anything. What do you use of nebulization? The same thing as budesonide showed, especially old people and who are, who cannot use this, and they have, one can definitely use nebulization. If anybody wants to, say something about it, somebody is congratulating all of us for having done a good job. I think all of us, my panelists, hats off to them. Well done. And I must say that none of us spoke before this webinar. We said, let's use on the spot our knowledge and do it. That's why it came out well. So any role for ecosprin and clopidogrel, I think, already answered that there is no role for it. There may be some who are using for marginal and they continue if they have comorbidity, nothing great about it. And there are post-COVID complication questions. Yes, we will do. Convalescent plasma, we answered. Vaccine available in India, can it be given to lactating mothers? Good question. Again, not many trials are there, even in pregnancy. But personally, I feel there is no contraindication. There are already 10,000 pregnant women given vaccine, in West and, especially in America. That is a different vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine. We don't have any trial on that. So we are not using for pregnancy and lactation.
Also, I would like to add one thing, sir.
Yeah.
This time, the pregnant females are very vulnerable to COVID.
Yes.
I've been seeing so much of mortalities, so much of intubation, so much of problems with these.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, you're
basically the younger population. I mean, the age group has come down.
Yeah.
Is it due to vaccine?
Yeah.
More than
I think
55 years vaccinated are safe. More than maybe. Who knows?
Maybe. Who
So
knows?
there's a question about how to treat a TB patient with COVID. I think, it's same as, anything. If you, there are, some, drug interactions that one has to be, careful.
I have one thing, sir. My TB patients are doing a little better with the COVID than my normal population. I don't know what the reason.
TB who are getting better. Like this, third month, fourth month in the disease, they are doing better.
Yeah, vaccination of a patient with ATD, yes, you must vaccinate all these people. When will the tofacitinib, to be introduced? I think Nagarjun made a, definitely a remark on tofacitinib that he is using and his experience on that. Please have one debate on vaccination separately. Krishna, please make a note. They want only on vaccination, I think is right, and also on ventilation, then baricitinib, rivaroxaban with enoxaparin, that's fine. I think people are saying when will the second wave end? So we're all waiting, for that. Prophylaxis for doctors: wear mask, take care. Just because you are vaccinated, don't lower your guard. Please, take all the measures, if possible, try to do online consultation for OPD, and then others must take care of themselves, because it's a long haul. It's not going to be, and more than anything, I keep saying this because, when you are ill and sick, 2 weeks is gone, and you are very important. You are like a soldier in the middle of a ravaging battle which is going on. Please take care. I think good question. There is
Stay positive.
Yes, be positive, of course. Yes, I know. And there is I think remdesivir in AKI and CKD, and if somebody is doing dialysis, I think one can go on give remdesivir. There's absolutely no problem. And if you think that it is really going to help, don't worry about the creatinine, and please give it, to these patients, and please monitor them well. There is something about duration of corticosteroids. We have said not too long, more than 2 weeks. One has to be very careful about it.
I found CRP, even in IPD patients, CRP very good marker for reducing my steroids. As soon as the CRP is declining, I will reduce my steroids accordingly. And very soon, in 7 days, I will be on the baseline steroid levels, and then I could titrate. Within 2 weeks, I would be titrating from a very high doses to even the stopping the steroids. So I always do CRP alternate day, or even some patients daily monitor to reduce the steroids accordingly.
Yeah. And then somebody is asking about steam inhalation. I'm not a great fan of steam inhalation. As I said, there is also, a lot of shortage of water because everybody is doing for last 1 year, the steam inhalation.
So there's something that even if you don't say, patient will do.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you're 100% right.
At least the skin is glowing now.
Okay. Repurposable drugs, there's a question. So I think most of it, all of us have answered very well. I think most of the questions were answered. What is the take-home message on all this is that, don't use the drugs which are not evidence-based. After 1 year, we should all be knowing, what works and what does not work. And then when it works, very important, I think we discussed about it. And not to introduce a steroid during the second day, third day, is a dreadful, kind of science that, that many are practicing, and it should definitely be, stopped and discouraged. And then, educate everyone, because, all of us, who have knowledge cannot be there with every patient and every hospital. So if you feel that something is wrong, just whisper in his ear that, this is not to be used. This, next time onwards, please avoid, because there are many who are treating, because this is a pandemic of that nature. So, we cannot be there everywhere, and those who have knowledge cannot be there. So, proactively educate them, guide them, take them on your side, and then tell them that, if you have any doubts, please ask me, I will try to, help you. So that kind of a message that we are giving to patients' audience today. And also, again, on vaccine. So please vaccinate. As today, Zaragir, our good friend Zareg Udwadia said to the BBC interview that it is going, at this pace, it is going to take 600 days to vaccinate 1.4 billion people. So that is, not good at all. And there was a surprise call for me this afternoon. My, professor, who is now 85, he called on the landline, Professor Graham Sterling from Southampton, and asking, Satish, are you safe? We are seeing all kinds of images on our BBC. Everything okay with you and how we are doing? And he said, fortunately, everything is fine. We are all vaccinated. So please encourage and do whatever you can to vaccinate, all your patients, family, friends, and yourself, and remove all the obstacles which are there for vaccination. And I think I will close this, webinar. I think we are on time. Time given was, about 9:30 or so. And excellent teamwork. And I congratulate again for the login. 1,500 odd login shows that, my panelists are excellent. Everyone was looking forward to hearing them. And Dr. Krishna, amazing man behind the scene here, and who came up very shortly, to tell us, what we should do, and then also discuss and where we have to focus. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe. And thanks the organizers, most importantly, for organizing this excellent webinar. I learned a lot, and I'm sure all of you learned, so much from this webinar. And stay safe, and good luck to you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Satish,
Thank you,
for
sir.
handling, monitoring the sessions. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks especially to Dr. N.S. Krishna for gathering.
Absolutely right. Yeah, for coordinating. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and then we'll close the webinar. Thank you.